Oh man, it has been too long since I've dug into a JRPG. I won't use a number, and today, we're looking at Am Setsuna. Despite what the name might imply, Setsuna is not the main character. Obviously, she's important to the plot, but you are first given control of a mysterious masked mercenary by the name of Indir. Unless you change it to some other probably childish bullshit. Cause you can do that in this game. Not that I would. I always stick with canon names. Hell, I even name Link, oh, wait for it, Link in The Legend of Zelda. I'd urge you to pick sort of serious names if you're going to do that, but I can't stop you from doing whatever the fuck you feel like, so I'm sure that someone is going to name the characters in this serious, somber story Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Fucknuts. Anyway, after a short section that serves as a tutorial, Indir is tasked with taking the life of the next sacrifice, the titular Setsuna. In this world, there's a village that sends out a sacrifice to a place called the Last Lands every few years. These sacrifices are meant to stem the tide of monsters, although exactly how and why that happens, no one knows. In past years, monsters have become more present and more aggressive than ever before, so this sacrificial pilgrimage's success is more important and more dangerous than ever before. Ooh. A bunch of shit happens, and Indir winds up joining the sacrifice's guard. I mean, if she sacrifices herself, she still dies, right? Mission fucking accomplished either way. And their journey across the frigid land gets underway. And I've resisted saying this for long enough. This is a real, proper JRPG from Square Enix. Well, sort of. It's the Tokyo RPG Factory, which is a smaller team, which is, to my knowledge, owned by Squeenix, but whatever. The point is, hell fucking yes. I know that Bravely Default and Bravely Second exist, which are clearly inspired by older Final Fantasy games, and those are great, don't get me wrong, but Am Setsuna draws inspiration from one of my all-time favorite video games, Chrono Trigger. The backbone of Am Setsuna's battle system is ripped straight out of Chrono Trigger. You can have 3 active party members who actually participate in combat. I assume everyone else just sort of stands there and watches, unable to interfere for fear of upsetting the JRPG gods. Inactive party members get half EXP. Turns are governed by ATB gauges. That's active time battle, and if you've somehow been purposefully avoiding JRPG mechanics for the past 20 or so years, that means that each character has a gauge that's speed of filling up depends on their speed. When it fills up all the way, the character gets a turn. Presumably the same thing is happening for the monsters in the background. On a character's turn, they can run up and strike the opposition physically with their weapon of choice. They can use items, standard JRPG fare of healing or MP restoration, or they can use techs, special moves or magic that cost MP to perform. There are also dual techs and triple techs, combo attacks between multiple characters where they use special moves together to produce new or more powerful effects. It's a system that encourages players to change up their party composition in order to take advantage of different double and triple techs. The actual position of monsters, and sometimes party members as well, is important. Some techs have a certain range that only hit monsters that are grouped together, so paying attention to the actual battlefield, as monsters roam around like mindless assholes, is important if you want to effectively use everything at your disposal. The one major difference in combat when compared to Chrono Trigger is the momentum system. Essentially, when a character's ATB gauge is filled, another gauge, the orb at the right of each character's portrait, starts to fill. Once filled, a button can be pressed during an attack to enhance the effect of said attack or add another effect to it. Some techs will restore a character's ATB gauge faster, or add some sort of status effect, or just straight up give more damage. The momentum gauge can store up to 3 charges of these, and double or triple text require each involved character to have 1 charge for an enhanced effect to take place. It's an interesting addition to combat because it forces you to question whether you should wait longer to act in order to gain additional effects, which adds just a bit more strategy to every encounter. Out of combat, monsters wander around each area you explore, which I much prefer to straight up random encounters. No random monster attacks on the world map either. Woo! And you can sneak up on an enemy to start the fight with a charge of momentum for each character and full ATB gauges all around. Techs are not acquired simply by leveling up. When you defeat monsters, you gain materials based on how you defeated them, specific elements of attacks, overkills, or near exact kills as they should be called, to name a few. These materials can then be sold to members of the Magic Consortium, which gives you your source of money in this game. Depending on what materials and how much of those materials have been sold to the Consortium, new Spiritine shards become available to you, which you can equip onto your characters. They come in 2 varieties, Command and Support. Command Spiritines are what provide text, while Support Spiritines provide passive abilities. You get more slots to equip Spiritine from leveling, and most accessories that provide various other benefits as well usually come with Spiritine slots of some kind. The system is fine for the most part, but I would have preferred if characters simply acquired skills by leveling up or completing story events. The only real problem with the system, aside from my personal preference for a more standard leveling thing, comes with communicating which command Spiritines combine with others to acquire the use of various double or triple texts. There is a menu which tells you all the combination of attacks that are available, but it's based on which Spiritine your characters already have equipped, and even at max level, characters do not have enough slots to equip all their skills. This means that if you want to find out what each double and triple tech does in-game, you have to go through every Spiritine that every character has in order to see which of those Spiritine on the 2 or 3 characters corresponds to the combo attack. Equip them, then check a separate menu to actually see what the attack does. Once the game's been out for a bit longer, I'm sure online resources will be available to conveniently find all of that information out, but it shouldn't be as much of a pain in the ass in-game to find that information. The only type of equipment in-game for each character is new weapons, which improve all attack and defense stats. I found it worthwhile to actually purchase each new weapon I came across in stores, and I'm the type of person who usually ignores most, if not all, equipment you can purchase in favor of equipment found in chests. You do find some weapons in chests, but don't expect it to happen too frequently. A lot of what happens in this game will be very familiar to those of you who have played a ton of JRPGs. It doesn't rip anything off wholesale, but many of the party members seem to fall into certain familiar archetypes, and I saw almost every plot twist and major development in the first half of the game at least, coming ahead of time, sometimes by hours. That said, I think it avoids being simply generic in a number of ways. Perhaps what helps the most is the pacing of the story. I never felt like any of the story offshoots detracted from the ultimate goal of reaching the last lands. It maintained urgency throughout the entirety of the main plot without being overbearing or tiring. I almost always knew where I had to go next and why I had to go there. There seemed to always be something that demanded attention, and that kept me interested. The only thing that interrupted that flow was 2 bosses that I got stuck on, and I had to go grind so I could beat them, you know. This is a JRPG. It does fall victim to some of the older faults. Also, you may have noticed that you can sometimes make decisions throughout this game. Indir is not a silent protagonist, but when he does speak, which isn't as often as most of the other party members, you get dialogue options. Let me ruin the illusion for you right now. None of these decisions will affect the plot in any grand or sweeping way, but it may affect how party members or NPCs view Indir as a character and provide variations in individual conversations. Even though these decisions ultimately don't matter, it added a bit of actual role-playing to this RPG. Let's all remember what the R stands for, eh? I was told that he was a mercenary, so I decided to pick more cold or aggressive options until I personally started to care about party members. Then I would pick kinder options. Being able to shape Indir as a character in that way added a lot to my experience. It was especially noticeable because I cared about all the party members by the time I finished the game. The path I chose to take Indir down with those decisions is one that happens a lot in fiction, but because I was making those choices in a way that actually reflected what I felt at the time, it made me that much more engaged with the plot, characters and world. For some of those characters, the only reason I cared was because I played through all the side quests, which are completely optional and, moreover, incredibly missable. Basically, once you reach the very end of the game, a portal appears to the right of where you'll be finishing the plot. Trust me, you will fucking know when you're there. Unless I was somehow not paying attention, the game doesn't really tell you to go explore again. But at this point, a side quest for each party member will become available, and the way you trigger them is obscure at best. Honestly, I only found out about these because I was messaging someone on Steam and saw a guide about them on the Steam overlay. I will link that specific guide in the description of this video so you can use it yourself. It's spoiler free, don't worry. Because to trigger each of these, you have to talk to a specific NPC somewhere in the world with a specific character in your active party. Some of these make sense. Setsuna's is in the starting village, at her house, but some are just random fucking people that actually have no connection to the character beyond being the start of their quest. And this optional content contains some of the most interesting lore about the world and most emotionally impactful moments in the whole game. Seriously, if you play this game, make sure you do all of these. What's more skippable, depending on what you're interested in, is various towers in the world that open up after a certain plot point. They're all stronger boss refights for their materials. Sort of interesting and certainly more challenging than most of the other content in the game, but they're not super worth your time and don't really do much that's very interesting, in my opinion. If you have fun with that kind of thing, go fucking crazy, man. Finally, this game's theming is super strong. The story is familiar ground, a desolate and sorrowful situation with a constant light of hope. Nearly everything about the game reflects those story elements. The music is both beautiful and sad, and all of the areas that you explore, that are outside at least, are covered in snow. I'm not sure if this is a completely snow-covered world, it just happens to be winter everywhere all at once, or if the adventure is taking place on a cold-ass continent, but it doesn't really matter. The developers of this game made the unique decision to give this world a consistent, snowy look. And despite that, I never felt like I was exploring just another snow area. I always felt as if I was making progress, even though everything was cold. Admittedly, I might be biased on this one. I fucking love snowy or icy areas in games, ice physics aside. It's an aesthetic I really appreciate, and I think more games could embrace a specific look that embodies the story's theme. Ultimately, Am Setsuna isn't without its problems, and it won't leave behind the same impact on gaming as the classics that inspired it, but it unquestionably manages to carve out its own identity. If you're a fan of JRPGs, this one is definitely worth your time. Am Setsuna is available for download on PS4 and PC. That said, this has been I Won't Use a Number. If you like this video, you can subscribe and maybe share it with your friends. Keep loving what you love, and I'll see you next time with something else.